We're ready to move on to the second frame-by-frame animation, which we are going to do add-on style, where this time we'll be featuring the F6 key, and the example will be like a flower that's growing before our eyes quickly. Now, we are going to do this on a new layer, so it's probably a good time to cover basic layer features. So you're automatically given your first layer and your first keyframe like we saw earlier. Let's go ahead and create a second layer. So you can see you got this little plus button right here, and if you hover the mouse over it, it says new layer. Click that, and then it's a good idea to name your layers. And you do that by double clicking in this area. So in my case, I'll call this flower. I'll go back down to the previous one, double click on it. Why is that being stubborn? Probably just had to do with the recording software buttons are really close there. We'll call this layer worm. So now we have our layers. Now, the layers are, if you think about them, they're just like these things that stack on top of each other that contain what we're doing. So to give you just a quick little demo of what I mean by that, I'm going to go on to this next layer, and I'm going to draw something big in this frame. I'll just use the rectangle tool, and I'll set that with no stroke but a fill of a red color, and so there we go. Big object, kind of half off, or a little bit off the stage. Most of the rest is on the stage, but you can see it covered the worm. Now, if I take that layer, and you can see that there's the worm. That's the keyframe right there that the red square is on. If I take this layer and I drag it below this layer, in my case with these goofy controls in the way, maybe I grab this layer and drag it on top. I may have to pause it and show you that. Okay, so by clicking and dragging, I move the worm layer above the flower layer, and the flower layer has this big box on it. So you can see the difference is when flower is on top, we can't see the worm, but when worm is on top, then we can see the worm, and we see past the worm to the layer that is below it. So that's the big, powerful features of layers. And then if you want to make sure that you can't select things or accidentally erase things on different layers, like you see that selection I just made by clicking and dragging with the selection tool, selected the worm and the box. See, when I hit delete, it all goes away. I'll Command Z to make that not delete. But if I wanted to just drag that section of the box and not the worm, what I can do is use this lock here to lock the worm layer. Now if I do that same thing, click and drag with the selection tool, I only grab the box, click delete, and the worm remains there. Command Z to undo that. And you can see another feature here is these eyeballs to toggle the layer on and off. So if I toggle the eyeball for the worm layer, it disappears because I have no visibility, is what that icon means. And then same thing, if I click on the flower layer, the visibility of that layer goes away. Okay, so let's clear out what we have on the flower layer with everything visible. And I'll just click here, which should select everything on that layer. Click delete, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the worm layer locked. That's a good precaution. Now, what we'll do here is we'll start that animation that we add to. So we now have our blank keyframe at the beginning. We will grab a color and the brush tool. So I've got the brush tool, and I'm going to just select a darker green for this, just so it's a different color than the worm. And okay, so what we're going to do is in this first keyframe, we're going to make, with a slightly smaller brush, just something kind of pops up there. And what we're going to be doing is making a plant grow before our eyes. So we're going to keep adding to it. So rather than have to start the drawing over every single time and repeat what we've already done, what we're going to do is just click on the next frame here and then click F6, and what's on the first frame gets copied to the second frame. And actually I did that a little bit wrong, so let me Command Z that. I want to actually click on the first frame, the frame that has something on it, and then click F6. Now what we see is we have the what we previously drawn, and we're just going to put the mouse over the top and draw a little bit more. And then we're going to do F6 again and continue to draw on that. Do F6 again. Now I'm going to make it look like maybe a leaf is starting to develop there. Do F6 again. Make it look like a little leaf is coming out of there. Do F6 again. I'll make this get a little taller. And the speed is entirely dependent upon how much you draw on each layer. So maybe I want the leaves to get a little bit bigger down here now. And maybe some smaller leaves sprouting out here, all at the same time. And just clean this up a little bit, make the leaves just even a little bigger yet. Start to add to these. You get the idea. Now you just want to have some fun here. So keep doing F6, adding to that. I'll pause a little bit, show you some of what I've done. Okay, so this is not the prettiest flower in the world, but you can see it develops here. Starts to get a bud on the top. So now what I can do is, this is a copy of this previous one. So now what I can do is take the brush tool. I'll make it even smaller. And I'll pick a red or whatever color I want my flower to be. And we'll just start making some instances of the flower developing now. So you get the idea. Again, you just keep being creative with this. I'll show you a nice shortcut here when you start using multiple colors. Instead of going back and picking colors in a cumbersome way that you've already used, you can just simply, and this will work as long as you don't have the text tool on, hit I, gives you the eyedropper, so you don't have to go over here and pick it from the menu here. Click on the item color that you want, and it will automatically change to that color, but it gives you this bucket tool. But then you just press B for the brush, and then you can continue on drawing with that new color. Oop, I must not pick what I wanted, so I'll go back to I for eyedropper. Make sure that now I have that darker color. B for brush, and here we go. All right, so I'll scrub the playhead here so you can see what I've done. And notice that these animations are occurring simultaneously, which is okay, but like I said before, we can stagger them to get ourselves the appropriate 10 seconds. And there's my pretty nasty looking flower. But that's good enough for this project. Like I said, be a little creative, but it's mostly just to get the feel for the timeline. Really understanding how the frames and the time correlate. So in other words, every 12 frames that you draw on equals 1 second, because right now we're set to 12 frames per second. And you can see the 1 second marker right there, the 2 second marker, the 3 second marker, and so on. So if you get the idea that in order to make your animation go slower, you would put more frames in, and each frame you would just draw a little bit on it. And if you needed the animation to go faster, then by here you would have already drawn a couple leaves. And by here the whole flower would be completed. And if you wanted it to last even longer, you would draw a little bit less on each frame. And maybe your flower's not completed until the playhead gets out to here. Okay, so we finished this. And now let's move on to this, which is really kind of the opposite. We're taking something now and subtracting from it instead of adding on, but we're still using the F6. So for this, we'll just create a circle in the sky. Maybe it's supposed to be the sun. Got the brush tool in the properties panel. I'm selecting yellow. I'm going to take the and just click and drag here. And note with these tools, if I hold down the shift tool, it constrains it to a perfect circle. So there's my perfect circle. Oh, and a mistake that I just made was I started drawing, two mistakes actually. I started drawing without knowing where I was drawing. I didn't have a frame made, and really I should have a new layer made. I also accidentally let my finger off the shift key before I released the mouse, so I didn't end up with a perfect circle. So I'm going to Command Z that, and we're going to create a new layer. So we go over here to the plus icon, new layer, and note if you ever make a layer that you don't need, you just click on it and hit the delete, the trash can. So we'll make this new layer. We'll name it Sun or something like that. It's giving me a little trouble because of the software, so I'll name it later. Click in here. So this is where I want that to go, and I may as well go ahead and lock the layer that the flower was on. Okay, so now we'll do this right. I'm going to hold down the shift key, draw this object over here in the corner, release the mouse, release the shift key. Okay, so now all we're going to do is F6 to give us an exact copy of that perfect shape. But instead of using the brush tool, this time we are going to use the eraser tool. So over in the tools, I grab the eraser tool, and just like with the brush tool, it looks like a brush. You can make it bigger or smaller with the left and right bracket keys. But if you click and drag with it, it's going to remove a chunk of that object. So I did that. I hit F6, do it again. Hit F6 and do again. And just keep doing that, taking chunks out of this piece with the eraser tool until there is nothing left. Okay, now if you focus on the yellow circle, you can see as I scrub the playhead that with each progressing frame, I deleted from it, and then I went to where I thought it was gone, and then clicked F7 so that I knew for sure it was gone there. Now, if you scrub the playhead backwards, it's actually more impressive, right? Because if you didn't know anything about the digital program, you would think, how could someone just start drawing these little shapes and put it together with such perfection? And that's what we're going to accomplish next, is we're going to take that animation and we're going to reverse it so that you meet this objective right here, the reappearing perfect shape. We'll do this on the same layer that we made the first perfect circle on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the first frame of that layer, and then I'm going to click on the last frame, which is this blank keyframe, hold down the shift key and click on it. So click on this one, hold down the shift key, click on this one. That selects all those frames. Then I'm going to click and drag. And now if I just clicked and dragged and let the mouse down, don't do this, but watch what happens if I did. It just moved all those frames, right? So you can see we have a blank keyframe here, and those are all those frames. So I'll Command Z that. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag, and this is what I want you to do. Click and drag. This time hold down the Option key. And what that'll do, with the Option key held down, release the mouse, then release the Option key. That gives us a copy of all that stuff. So now we go to here. We have the same thing again. But now what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to click the first frame, the last frame. Well, click the first frame, hold down the shift key, click on the last frame. Now we go up to the menu and we go Modify, Timeline, and then we go to Reverse Frames. Doesn't look like much happened, but what did happen was that now everything is truly reversed. So as this one finishes up, we get onto this one, which starts with that